The freedom of living without a self-image. What does that really mean? Well, I thought we would dig deep into that in this episode. My name is Josefin, and you're listening to Consciousness in Me. So what do I mean when I say self-image? Well, I mean not only an observation of how we normally behave, of which roles we play in society, but actually identifying with them. Like I could have a role of myself of being a calm person who lives in Gothenburg. Well, that's just an analysis of how I normally behave, for example. And the difference is that if I think I am a calm person who lives in Gothenburg, that means that I've attached my identity into being calm. So if I'm not calm, I don't feel like myself. If I move away from Gothenburg, it feels like I lose an identity. And this could be tied up with so many things. It could be tied up with work, with emotional states. It could be tied up to another person. I am the wife of such and such, or I'm the mother of this person. Or it could be a title. I'm a doctor. I'm a taxi driver. I'm a mental health specialist. Whatever. And it's not just an observation, it's an identity. This is who I am. When this is not true, I feel out of place with myself. And they're not always positive. They could also be, I always fail. I'm a failure. I'm not a valuable person. I'm not a person that people normally listen to. And if we have to choose a self-image, well, it's nicer to have a positive self-image than a negative self-image. But even the fact that we have a self-image, we pay a price for that. We're not completely free. We kind of have to check that we're being ourselves. And sometimes it's so subtle, so we don't really know that we have a self-image. It's only when something shows up in us, when we feel a certain way or when we do something that's not in line with our self-image, that's usually when we become very much aware that we have a self-image. Once we stay within the confines of what is acceptable for our self-image, it might be quite quiet. And it's easy to become loyal to the self-image. So we almost don't want to see it because we've invested so deeply into thinking that it's us that even the idea of challenging it becomes like a threat to our very existence. But usually it's associated with strong emotions. Like when someone mirrors something back at you. Like let's say I have an image of myself that I am a very fair person. And then someone comes up to me and mirrors that they don't think I was fair in a situation. All of a sudden it feels like my right to exist has been challenged. So my emotional reaction to this person is actually quite strong. All they expressed is that they felt unfairly treated, and I react as though they've questioned my whole right to exist. Because that's what it feels like. When they say that they were treated unfairly by something I did, they challenge my identity. If I am a fair person, then they cannot be right. So I might go into actually defending my self-image rather than listening to what they said. And this become a problem in relationships, but it could also become a problem just for ourselves. We could be shaming ourselves if we feel things that we thought we wouldn't be feeling. So an example of how this has shown up in my own life. Like I have a self-image where I would like to be professional at work, where I got my stuff together. And when I was newly employed at a work, I showed up at a meeting, and something about this meeting made me feel very uncertain. I didn't really feel like I belonged, and there was a lot of nervousness coming up in me. And I was asked to present myself in front of these other people. And there was a lot of nervousness, and I remember mumbling something, and I was not pleased with how I came across. And that didn't really resonate with the image I had of myself. I didn't want to prove that I sometimes am nervous in professional settings, that I don't come across as being professional and on top of things. And the thing that was uncomfortable about that, it wasn't that I was nervous in a meeting. No, the thing that was really uncomfortable is that it's challenged the view I have of myself. That didn't fit the image I had of myself, and that made it uncomfortable. That brought up shame and self-blame. And it was nothing about the actual context that made those feelings appear. It was the contrast to my self-image. So a way of letting go of our self-image is to invite these parts of ourselves that we've shunned away, that we don't think are so lovable. But life hasn't said they are not lovable. Life has manifested them in us. And sometimes they come up. Maybe it happens once a day, maybe it happens once in 10 years. It doesn't really matter. What's interesting is what's alive in me now. That's the truth of who I am in this moment. Doesn't really matter what I think of myself or how I think I should be. And then you might ask, well, how does one live if we don't have a self-image? How do you know how you're supposed to show up in any moment? And that's an interesting question, but it also reveals something. When we think like that, we don't act spontaneously from our own essence. We check, how should I behave in this moment in order to fulfill a script, the image of myself? And if we don't need to check an image of ourselves, then when we overflow with joy, we express joy. When there's love, we express from love. When there's an impulse to dance, we dance. And that might sound like a childish behavior, and it could be, but there's also a mature way to do that. And that means that we check with our surroundings as well, because we don't have to exclude our wisdom or our ability to read the room. If I'm at a funeral and I get an impulse to dance, yes, I have an impulse to dance, but I also have love for the people in grief. So naturally, that's also a value I hold. So it's not very likely that my deepest impulse, my most authentic impulse, is to follow the dance impulse. I don't need to check with an image that says, oh, I'm not the kind of person who ruins funerals. I'm a well-kept together kind of person. No, it comes from my truth. It comes from love for people in grief. And it comes from the joy of wanting to dance. And that kind of balance itself out. And maybe the fact is that once you look at my whole life, I am a person who is respectful. But not because that's what I think of myself, but because that's the result of me living out my authenticity in every moment. So it's not that the analysis of a self-image is wrong. It could be very correct. Maybe I am a calm person, a responsible person. The thing is that I don't check with that image to assert who I am. I don't check with that image to know how I'm supposed to react in this moment. And I don't shame myself if I don't follow a script. Sometimes there might be shyness coming up. Sometimes there might be taking up a lot of space that's unnatural for me. Maybe I feel like singing karaoke out loud at a karaoke bar. I've never done that before, but all of a sudden here comes the urge, and it goes against what I thought was in my range of things I wanted to do. But right now, that's what happened. And it doesn't become an identity crisis to follow those impulses. I might become very touched in a meeting that I normally don't show emotions in. But I can allow them to come because I don't have an image of myself of being kept together and always under control of my emotions. No, I have emotions as a human being, and I let them express when they want to express. It becomes much more fluidity in who we are, and it becomes a bit of a joy to explore who we are. Who am I really? I don't know. I don't have an image of myself. I'll just have to find out in every moment. I rediscover myself in every moment. I don't form an image of myself and then try to live up to that image. And that doesn't mean I have to be afraid of losing myself, because letting go of a self-image can feel like you're losing yourself. You can't lose what you are. You are life. You don't need a script in your head of who you're supposed to be in order to be yourself. That's just a natural unfoldment that happens within you. You don't need to remember what kind of humor you have. When a joke that's funny to you comes your way, you will laugh. Not because you remember that, yes, this checks the box of the humor I've decided to like. No, you laugh because that is your humor. You don't need to remember it. It's a natural expression of who you are. Living without a self-image. True liberation. Freedom. Real authenticity. Allowing ourselves to be just the way we are. What are your thoughts on this? Did this episode awaken something in you? Please share in the comments. And if you like this content and would like some more, don't forget to subscribe. I hope to see you next time.